Chuck White, what is going on, man?
What's up, Ben? How are you, buddy?
Oh, dude, I am so blessed right now and excited to see your face on my computer screen right now.
Be careful about seeing my face there, buddy.
You know, twice a year wasn't enough for me, Chuck. I said, hey, why don't we go ahead and do a little video conference here and get crazy and talk a little bit about this global household goods contract. And I'm so honored to have you today, Chuck.
Well, I mean, I appreciate you inviting me to. You become the presence on the mobility web, so I'm honored to be in with you, buddy.
Isn't that scary? I mean, who put us in charge, Chuck? I mean, really?
I don't know. Anybody watching this right now is just shaking their head. Thinking,
how did we get here?
Yeah. What is wrong with these people, and what's wrong with
the best we could do?
Yeah. Hey, wait a minute.
You're only 30% of that joke, Chuck. All right.
Okay.
So,
all right.
No, but this is great. So you know, we're going to let some people kind of come in here and kind of filter in. We are live right now on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn right now. So we're going to let some people kind of show up here.
You are a media mogul, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm like a young Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, you are there. You are there.
If Rupert Murdoch actually did his own work, I'd be like him. Let me see here and make sure I get my little feed. I can't even find my own feed. There I am. Okay. Got a little 10-second lag here. We got people coming in here. Let's see. We've got about 30 people so far. They're going to trickle in here. Hey, guys, when you come in here, and this is my little phone, when you come in here, make sure to leave a comment so I know you're in the stream right now. So go ahead and say, hey, let us know where you're coming to us from, city, state, country, just 3 words. That's all you need. Because this is an international stream right here. We got the International Association of Movers President Chuck White with us. And go ahead and leave us your city, state, country. Also, go ahead and mash that like button, those applause button. It really makes me feel good in a weird way. So
yeah, I'm old school. Can I clap for real?
You can really clap because people can see you. These other people in their underwear, we can't see them, so they need to hit the green button with the hands.
Those images are kind of a little bit scary for me.
Yeah. Well, it's moving, you know. It's a dirty job, you know. So Chuck, you're here. We got 36 people, 38 people. They're trickling in now. I know a lot of people were very excited when we posted that we were going to be on. Chuck, where are you coming to us from right now, Chuck?
I'm in my conference room at my office. We are located in Alexandria, Virginia, which is, I don't know, about 15 minutes outside of Washington, D.C.
Beautiful. And then you're at IAM HQ right now?
Yeah, IAM Central. That's exactly right. On beautiful U.S. Route 1 in Alexandria, Virginia.
Lovely. I got to come check you guys out.
Yeah, come, please.
We're up to 43. Okay, cool. Well, let's go ahead and let's acknowledge some of the people. We got Sam Basson. Hi guys. Steven Simpson.
Sam.
Good job, boys. Well, you know, not yet. James Grady. Hi from ArcBest Moving. Francine Dressy. This is amazing. Sally Ann Aversano. Hey from Sunrise, Florida. Chad Johnson. Hi guys. Steven Simpson, Jamesburg, New Jersey. Don Hassel, Move One. Francine Dresty, St. Louis, Missouri. Chip Wagner, hey, from snowy Naperville, Illinois. Hey, Chip.
Ooh.
Let's see here. Brad Willie, hello from Sarasota, Florida. Now you're showing off, Brad. Stanley Burke, hey, guys. Sterling, Virginia. Tracy Cohey, Annapolis, Maryland. Mark Colmer, Denver, Colorado. In here. Steven Simpson, hi, Sally. Carmen Vendenha. Hello from Shelton, Connecticut. Yaron, hi from New York. Tomislav, hi from Belgrade, Serbia.
Like it.
Jake Lowry, hey guys, you're in Texas. I know you are. Tracy Gunn, hi from the Valley of the Sun, Phoenix. Lloyd from Shoreview Moving and Storage. All right, awesome. And I'm sitting here in beautiful Farmington Hills, Michigan. It is 23 degrees, snow on the ground.
How far are you from Detroit?
I am 40 minutes from the D.
Okay.
From downtown Central Business District.
Got it.
You make it to Detroit often, Chuck?
I don't. In fact, I've only been there a couple of times. We have I'm an association guy, and there is an association for association people. It's called the American Society for Association Executives. And probably 4 years ago, they had their annual conference in Detroit. It's a small conference of about 6,000 to 7,000 people. And it's a citywide. And we took over Detroit. We did our thing there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who buys the drinks at the conference for associations?
Well, much like IAM's conference, the association spends a lot of money on alcohol.
Touche.
So I appreciate that.
All right, let's see here. So we got 53 people in the live stream right here. Let's go ahead and get started. Chuck, thanks again for being here. I do appreciate it. We're coming here because we're coming to you guys live right now because so many of you wanted to hear about the global household goods contract. The global household goods contract is something that that began last year. And Chuck, I'm going to ask you to kind of give us an overview. How did we get here? Set the table for us. What happened that really you think initiated this chain of events?
Well, there were a number of events that happened. So summer of 2018, peak season 2018 for the moving industry in the DoD arena was perceived as being a bad year. There was a lot of media coverage. There were a number of congressional inquiries, and really what topped it all off, there was a military spouse who went on a website called change.org. And that's just kind of a generic website where you can go on and throw a petition up to change anything in the world you want to change. Well, she thought that this was the time to change how military moving happened and the quality of military moving. Out of that, she got over 100,000 signatures to her petition. Now, it was pretty generic because it said, do you want to improve military moving? You think it's time? Well, of course, anybody's going to say, sure, we want to improve that. And but it got the attention of some congressional offices. It got the attention of a number of DoD offices. And at almost that exact same time, we had a change in leadership at U.S. Transportation Command, which is the organization that oversees household good moving for the military. And so when this new 4-star general, General Stephen Lyons, came in, he started to contemplate the idea that it was time to move to a more what's called FAR contracting, Federal Acquisition Regulations contract. And instead of doing, in quotes, mini contracts with 900 transportation service providers, he wanted to have one belly button to push when something went wrong. And so he said, we're going to go toward a contract awarded to a single entity to handle 400,000 shipments annually to the tune of $2.3 billion or so. So this is a major paradigm change. And so at that point, that's when the process started to roll down at us.
Now, that seems like an enormous award. It seems like just from the outset, you're talking about 400,000 shipments globally. And how many countries does the U.S. military deploy people to?
Well, there are, I think, 13 major traffic lanes. You look at Germany and the UK and Italy, Belgium, Korea, Japan. Those are some of the big ones. But I think there are about 13 major channels that they operate in and out of the U.S. But as part of that, they also do a smaller number of shipments basically to almost any country in the world. They do South America, they do a number of Middle Eastern countries. And so, it definitely has a worldwide scope. Australia, so definitely a worldwide footprint.
So in this change.org petition and in some of the scuttlebutt that was going on, I think there was maybe a Military Times article or something like that, a couple a couple of op-ed pieces maybe along the way. I mean, you know, can you give us a little more of a flavor around what some of the complaints might have been and what some of the types of issues might have been that people were?
Yeah. Again, I mean, the focus is on, just like in any corporate relocation or any local move, it's on the quality of the service that's provided. There have been some complaints about that. There have been complaints about the communication between military members and the organizations that are handling the relocation. There's issues surrounding, they say, the claims process when goods are lost or damaged, that they feel that even though we're in a full replacement environment, that what are called the transportation service providers, TSPs, are not stepping to the plate and making sure that that process is handled appropriately. So again, the problem is, from my perspective, it's all anecdotal. We keep hearing about, well, this one time this happened, or this one time something else happened. But when you're handling 400,000 shipments in a year, there's no question there are going to be some mistakes that are made. In any service industry that happens. But if you look at the scoring that is involved, the quality scoring that DoD uses right now, the scoring indicates that 90% or better of service members are satisfied at a minimum, or find it even, at an excellent level, the service that is provided them. So to say that something is completely broken and needs to go through this full revamp, I just don't think is justified, particularly based on the data.
Yeah, and so when I look at this, to outsource something of this magnitude, I look back and I can remember when I was first coming into to the industry, and actually it was at the same conference when I met you for the first time. It was at
go ahead.
It was at SDDC Symposium in Denver, Colorado, I believe.
Yep.
And
and you were working for whom?
I was working for Pods.
Pods, exactly.
Okay, quick little aside, okay? Quick aside here, okay? Our mutual friend Tim Vandegrift, my buddy, who kind of helped me understand a little bit about this business, he said, hey, if you want to get a container company into the military program, first you need to start at the NDTA and come in through that organization. And so he invited me to the SDDC Symposium. He told me, okay, after the symposium, there's a household goods breakout, kind of similar to a PPF nowadays, or a hot wash or something like that, And so we got a little ballroom, and the services were there, and Lieutenant Colonel Oliver, who was the guy running the show back then, was there, and you were there, and Terry was there, and AMSA was there, and a whole bunch of all the van line guys were there, and I was kind of in the back of the room. I was probably 27, 28 years old. I was not a TSP. I was working for Pods. A lot of people considered us, frankly, the enemy of the industry, right? And because we were operating under the exclusive, limited service exclusion, right? And so the laws of the moving industry didn't apply to us, right? And the services and SDDC were kind of beating the industry up because they were saying, where's the capacity and all this stuff, and the industry is like, well, but you got to understand, and you can't have everybody move at the same time. And, I raised my hand and I'm like, well, I was like, hey, I gotta take a shot. I got to shoot my shot, right? And I raised my hand and they called on me, and they're like, nobody knows who this guy is. And I said, well, if there's a capacity problem, I got 140,000 containers and I didn't get a phone call. And you turned around. I still remember looking at you turned around like this, like, and who are you again?
I remember.
I was crossed with Pods, and then Colonel Oliver said, well, then you need to talk to the TSPs. And I said, well, how do I become a TSP? And he said, I can't teach you how to cut grass, youngin. Yeah. I remember that. So point being is I've learned a lot since then. And the scuttlebutt at that current meeting was really about the freight industry and the DTCI contract that was happening.
Right.
Where there was this idea that we could outsource all of our freight, the military could outsource all of its freight spend through the DTCI contract and then handle, 90% of the freight or something. And if they did that, economies of scale would say that they would save all this money, right?
Right.
And it was outsourced to Menlo, which from my understanding was basically a company formed for the express purpose of this contract.
100%.
Right. And I think Conway had it, and then maybe they sold it to UPS or vice versa. Well, only 20% of freight ended up moving through that and again, my facts might be wrong, so don't crucify.
No, I think you're about right. Yeah.
And it turned out, and the general at the time puffed out his chest and said, "Look at all the money we saved." And then a few years later, an inspector general report came out and said, actually, and a whistleblower case came out and said, actually, they've been fudging the numbers, charging for air freight when it was going surface and doing all sorts of things. The data can't be trusted. We have no confidence in the program, and we're going to tear it all down.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you talk about that. They also unbelievably have a second iteration of that called DFTS, Defense Freight Transportation System, something like that.
Okay.
And that's really DTCI Part 2. And it's even a smaller footprint, but they still are hanging on to that concept of freight moving via this one single contractor. It's Crowley right now who is the entity that's oversees that contract, but they are using that. They're using the contract to move personally owned vehicles, POVs, and some of the contracts they have on the ocean shipping side as examples of how the current contract for household goods should operate, what it should look like. Those are kind of the templates that they are using. So it really is very interesting that even though some of these programs have not seen great success, Transcom still wants to go down this road to be able to have one contract, one contractor that they can point to and say, if things go right, thank you. If things go wrong, it's your fault. And it takes them out of the picture.
Well, and the one thing I would agree with is they're not in the business of move management. And I would concur with that. And that is probably the reason you've seen such a rise in the companies that do military move management. I mean, those companies have come to control a predominant market share with a handful of companies, that kind of intercede in that process. But now going back to what you said, though, with the Crowley thing, are you referring to the POV contract? Is that what you're referring to? Or is
no, there's really two. There's the POV contract.
Because that also is a corollary as well, I think.
No question. That there's an organization called IAL, International Auto Logistics, who moves about 50 to 60,000 personal vehicles for military when members go overseas. And I mean, it's about a $1 billion contract annually. And it's a big deal. There's no question about it. And though it's had some issues, the military touts that as a significant success and a reason to move household goods to this environment.
I'm going to say something maybe that you can't say, but I'm reading online about this and I'm talking to people, that have knowledge of the auto contract. And at least early on, the first year or two, everything I'm hearing is that it was a disaster and cars are ending up all over the world and nobody knows where they are. And actually the company raised their hand and said, we don't want to be in this deal anymore. And they said, no, you're in it and you have to and figure it out. And they couldn't perform and they didn't have the partnerships in place when they won the agreement and they underbid it. And it's just, I can't help but think this is the exact same path that we're on right now.
We're making the same arguments because, so what happened under that scenario, there was a contractor in place for about 10 years and they had ironed out all of the issues and they had a pretty good process in place. But as the government is wont to do, they're trying to squeeze a buck and get some cost savings in here. And so they rebid the contract and awarded it to somebody to save a few pennies on the dollar. Well, in that transition, it was, you're correct, a disaster. And here's the thing, just like with the POV contract, this future global household good contract, there's no fallback. I mean, once the contract is awarded and the current program's infrastructure goes away, then the government has to do whatever it needs to do to ensure that goods continue to move, that it's deemed a success. And that's really what they did with the POV contract. One of the things that they did for them was they took all the transit times. You had so many days to move a vehicle from point A to point B. And they increased all of those transit times so that it would look like now this new contractor was meeting all the goals for the contract. Well, yeah, you did it only because we changed the rules in the middle of the game. And that's exactly what I can see happening as we move to the future. You hand off 400,000 shipments to a new entity who has not handled that kind of scope, because there is no such scope in the world.
No. I mean, the military is the largest customer of household goods moving in the world. Am I correct? The United States?
Oh, it's not even close. When you think of some of the big boys that are out there, a Marriott Corporation, an Amazon, those kinds of things, if they move 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 relocations annually, a contractor that works for them feels like they've died and gone to heaven. With that kind of volume guaranteed on an annual basis, you're willing to do whatever you need to do to maintain that contract. When you take that and multiply it by hundreds, it's just unbelievable.
Well, and maybe to give some of our mobility audience, some of our corporate relocation audience out there that might be watching this, to give you guys an idea too, the largest RMCs might move 40,000 people a year, maybe. Right. And you're talking about a magnitude of 10x larger. The infrastructure just does not exist. So that's interesting. So that kind of brings us to, well, who do they think could win something like, who could perform on something like this?
Interesting. So some of the information, maybe a little sensitive, but I'm willing to share some of what I know with your audience. What has happened is the bids went out for this in November. They have just in the last week narrowed it down to 4 entities, and they are all consortiums. They're made up of multiple organizations because, as we said, there's no one organization that can handle that. Many of these consortiums, all 4 of these consortiums, have large steamship lines associated with them. There are the largest of the van lines that are associated with it. You mentioned the move management companies that have come into vogue in the DoD program. The 2 largest of those are bidders in this. And some of those contractors that we talked about that are already working with Transcom, the POV contractor, the freight contractor, who have those relationships already with Transcom, are also on these bidding teams. So I think you can take from that most people would know that 2 larger move managers that are involved in the program. I think most people understand the 3 largest domestic van lines. We know, I'll call one of them out. Serva is a huge entity in both the household good movement, but also in the mobility realm. And with their recent acquisition of Cardis, they make them a pretty significant player in this, and they have others on their team. So these are the kinds of entities who are involved with this final 4 that has come forward.
So to piece this together for the people that don't know some of the stack rankings of who the biggest are, TMM and Tier 1 are your 2 largest military move management companies. And of your van lines, Unigroup, which is United Mayflower, Atlas World Group, which is Atlas Van Lines, and then Servo, which is North American and Allied Van Lines. You know, these are the people that are playing. And what's interesting to me is that not only are van lines partnering with steamship lines and move management companies, but some cases van lines are partnering with other van lines to get
no question about it. Some of the big guys that you think, these orange trucks over here and these gold yellow trucks over there and those blue trucks over there, oh my God, they'd never talk, they'd never work together. Well, because of the size of this contract, I mean, we are talking about, with the length of the contract and the extensions that are involved in the base years, you're talking about a contract whose value is pushing up toward $20 billion over the life of the contract. I'll say that again, $20 billion. And thus that's also gotten the interest. Some of the other folks that are involved in some of these consortiums have nothing whatsoever to do with moving and mobility. Right. They are just large government contractors, defense contractors who build airplanes and any weapon systems, et cetera. Because when you start talking about a price tag of near $20 billion, everybody's eyes light up. So there are going to be companies involved in this that nobody's ever heard of in our arena. That's for sure.
At one point, Amazon was involved, right?
That's the rumor. I've not been able to find any evidence, but that rumor was rampant. But
rumors don't need evidence, Chuck. Rumors don't need evidence, okay? All right.
True that.
High journalism. Nobody's getting a Pulitzer today, okay, Chuck? All right.
For sure.
I've heard that contingent or suspected contingent allegedly is out, though. I've heard that they may be out.
Yes, that is my understanding. So we're down to those 4 entities, and so unless we're down to 4 entities, and unless we've missed something along the way, Amazon is not part of those groups. We understood probably 3 other groups, somewhat smaller, that were bidders on the contract. At the same time, the 4 received the letters that they were still in the running and that they were coming in to do one-on-one interviews with U.S. Transportation Command. 3 other entities received the sorry, thanks, but no thanks letters as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Some large transportation companies, kind of like how the Menlo thing went down, DTCI. JB Hunt was involved at one point, is no longer pursuing.
Right. JB Hunt, my understanding was, literally came down to the day before bids were due. They had put together bids and were going to be, we think, a significant player in this. JB Hunt, one of the largest freight companies in the United States. And their CEO at the 11th hour said, there's just too much risk in this. There's a lot of money that's going to have to be upfront money to put IT systems and personnel in place. It's not our core business. And so we think we're going to drop out of the running. And let me tell you, and tell your listeners, to put together a bid of this magnitude, I had not been really privy to this kind of bid in the past, but I've got some good friends that have been involved as consultants. I've been involved as personnel on these teams, and the bids and putting together these bids are approaching $2 million just to put the bid together. I mean, people are talking about I've talked to one bidder, had 30 people working full-time, 6 days a week for months to put this bid together. So, wow. I mean, this is pretty significant. Again, you're willing to spend a couple million for a $20 billion contract.
So it's a 10-year contract, $2 billion a year plus annually. Is that kind of what we're thinking?
Yeah, it's a little less than that. There's 3 base years. Mm-hmm. There's 3 option years. Then there are 2 more years at the government's discretion. So there's 8. And then there are a few little add-ons. So we're thinking it's going to probably run, because you just don't build up the infrastructure, right, build up whatever is necessary, and then all of a sudden say, oh, let's just rebid that. Somebody else will come in and do it. Right. So we think that with the add-ons, it's probably going to be at least 9 years.
Yeah, wow. Wow, incredible. Want to take a quick look here at the comments and everybody that's on here. Thanks everybody who's logged in. We're up to 81 people live streaming this right now on LinkedIn alone. And then we've got a bunch on, we got another dozen or so on Facebook as well. We got some questions coming in here. Let's see here. Let's do the check-ins real quick. Australia's in the house. Deborah Sylvie. Paul Clifford, hello from Vancouver, Canada.
All right.
It's an IAM buddy of mine. Mark Nelson looking sharp, Ben. Captain Obvious over there. Appreciate you. Jim Welsh. Hi, Jim Welsh from Chicago. Hey, Jim. Killing it with his live sessions. Ben Cross from Joshua Rose. I appreciate you. Got a couple questions here. First question I got here coming in actually is via Facebook. So let's take a question here. Just because, right? Because we can do it. So I got it here on the screen because if you're on Facebook or YouTube and you ask your questions, I can actually put them on the screen, and that's really fancy. So you
are Mr. Technology. My goodness.
You know. Eric Scorzelli. Hey, Eric, friend of the program. Question: based on your own pod's history, did the moving industry miss the opportunity to change the capacity limitations by building alternative capacity? Containerized shipping and LTL freight into move management back then. Love to hear Chuck's take on this also. Yeah, so Eric, great question. The industry can't do anything. The individual players and businesses have to be the ones to say, yes, I'm going to invest in, containerized technology, or I'm not, and I'm going to keep my status quo going. What I do applaud IAM for is it was the first organization I saw talking publicly a few years back about how do we institute standards around containerization, because they understood that you needed to have universal containers. The problem that you see with a lot of these PMSCs, portable moving and storage container companies, little known fact, I actually helped write the regulation that allowed PMSC.
I was going to give you some credit.
Appreciate you. But you can't have non-standard containers, and you can't have assets that cost $2,500 to $4,000 a pop, and then ship it off to Minot, North Dakota to some agent, and then not know when you're going to get it back. So, what's funny is all these container companies have popped up and they've invested tens and hundreds of $millions into their fleet. And it's great, especially as a consumer product, but it's really only applicable between their locations. It requires proprietary delivery mechanisms. It's super expensive and has to, it's a corporate asset. So it's not truly viable. And what you see, the predominant mode of containerization still to this day, and since 1948, has been the ocean container and its cousin, the lift van, right? And that's where we're at. And I think that's where we're going to be for a long time. Chuck, thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And you and I had this discussion going back to that meeting that we met one another. And I was all for allowing the utilization of the non-lift van-like containers, portable moving and storage containers as they've come to be known in the military. And it was you who really pushed that on behalf of pods to move in that direction. And to your credit, the government really bought in. Who didn't buy in, and for some of the reasons that you've articulated, what was our industry. Everybody had their own proprietary size, model, materials that they were using. And so a pod wasn't like whatever Unigroups was and Sam's and, what was the other company you worked
1-800 Pack Rat.
1-800
and what was
Pack Rat.
funny was they were all kind of like 16 foot by 8 by 8, but like I couldn't ship a 1-800 Pack Rat container to a United agent and then them roll it out on somebody's driveway tomorrow. So because it's a consumer product and the brand is on the side like a billboard, you just couldn't swap them around and stencil another name on them.
And the conveyances were very different. You had to have a specialized truck and a specialized type of forklift to come off to offload it and to reload it. And then, as you said, I'm sending it to places where it's just going to sit. I'm going to have to figure out, there's no cross movement of that traffic or backhaul, so to speak. So the uptick on those were just not as, it didn't happen as quickly and to the degree that I think DoD hoped and that organizations like PODS had hoped. And so they just have not really gained a foothold. There's just, if 1% or less of the traffic moves in the DoD program via those conveyances, I'd be surprised if it's that high.
I'd be shocked. And frankly, you don't have enough density in those containers, and you can only fit 3 to a truck at 5,000 pounds per. You're only shipping 15,000 pounds per power unit. And right now, these tractor trailers are getting 28,000 pounds per power unit. And with the driver short, I mean, it just doesn't. The math doesn't work. So, great question though. Got another question here. Dave O'Connor writes, really insightful to hear the scales of military versus corporate versus relo total handling by RMCs. Curious if either of you have an opinion on how I'm assuming military, plays a move management role. Plays a move management role in the totality of the military contract.
Well, I think I can touch on some of that. I think what he's going to is the DoD itself going to be involved in the move management of the traffic under the new paradigm? And what I would say is the military with this contract is doing every single thing it can to get out from under the move management. What you've already touched on it. I mean, I had a meeting with the 4-star General Stephen Lyons, who runs Transcom, and his reasoning, his number one reason behind wanting to move to a contract and get out from under the current paradigm is because he said, we don't know your business. We don't do a very good job at move management.
Right.
We want to hand it over to the experts. I get that. And I applauded that at the time. The problem is as he's speaking on one side of his mouth about, we don't know your business, he's writing a contract that deals with all kinds of potential changes in the way that traffic will be handled. And he didn't reach out to the industry at all to get any thought about whether this makes sense or not. So while he says in one side, we don't know your business, he's rewriting the rules in our business. So it really makes no sense. And I'm very worried he's setting himself and DoD up for failure, but the industry is going to suffer as a result of it. And I see many multi-generational organizations, family businesses falling by the wayside as we wade through the first couple of years of this new contract.
Why don't you think they'll be able to adapt, Chuck?
Well, again, if I just look at it from the perspective of the award winner. I think I'm going to have to build efficiency as much as possible into my processes. And with efficiencies, I think you're going to see fewer and fewer participants. Where there might have been around a military installation, 5 agents that were involved in origin destination work. Do I want to work with all 5 of those? Maybe I can work with 2 or 3 of those, have them build up their capacity over time. And unfortunately, a few people fall by the wayside. Also, particularly in the focus of my organization in the international arena, we see very, very many. There are 170 to 200 of these approved transportation service providers that are small. I'd almost call them mom and pop types, where you have 2, 3, 4 people in an office. Is it going to move me as the new contractor to dole out work to 200? Or maybe if I cut down to 10 or 15 or even less, many of those entities, those van lines, those move managers have the ability and have staff to move these international shipments in-house. So why do I need that many providers? So I really see many organizations that are currently service providers, both at the agent and at the direct contractor TSP level, falling by the wayside just to build efficiencies for this contract.
And that was a question actually. That I got also. How does this impact international TSPs, which you kind of alluded to? Do they all just go away and roll up, or is it?
I can see, again, we don't know what the business strategy is going to be for whomever wins the contract. Mm-hmm. I can see them taking the expertise in a number of the current international freight forwarders that are involved in the DoD program and utilizing that expertise. But I can guarantee you they don't need 170 to 200 entities moving 300, 400, 500 shipments annually. They're going to look at somebody who moves 5,000 shipments, 10,000 shipments and say, we'll utilize you, build up your staff, be able to do a few more, or we're going to keep all the money and do that forwarding in our own offices.
I would think that they would become the forwarder. I mean, that's what I would think. I mean, because forwarders essentially, for people that don't know that, are brokers and move managers themselves. And so for a move manager, yep, exactly. So now the flip side of that is the argument's been made by smart people who I respect that men in trucks will always win. You will always need movers and trucks and assets. So if you are a TSP, yes, you should be concerned. If you are a legitimate asset-based moving company with rolling stock and quality movers, you're going to be okay, and maybe even better because there's going to be less of a middleman or middle layer taking revenue out. What do you think about that argument?
See, I would be opposed to that. I think that's not necessarily the case. Will the significant players in the marketplace be able to survive and have a place? 100%. But as many of the folks that are involved in the DoD know, most of DoD installations are in remote areas.
Right. They're North Carolina.
Yeah, they're in Georgia. They're not in New York City. They're not in LA. Right. And so many of them are small entities that survive and do gangbuster work through the summer. But we are a very seasonal business. And so will that contractor, again, we don't know, but will they choose to dole out the work to try to keep everybody healthy, everybody alive, so that in the non-peak, they'll be available to them in the peak? Mm-hmm. And I would venture to say, I don't think so, especially if we are talking about a van line being one of the entities involved on the winning team. Again, I'm going to call them all out. So if Unigroup wins the contract, are they going to be willing to subcontract work out to Serva, the Allied, the North American agents, who then they are in fact propping up and helping to support their largest rivals?
I think, but to your point though earlier, Chuck, I mean, the 400,000 shipments, let's back up. Let's go to the number 400,000. How many of those are domestic, would you say?
We believe that about 58%, you do the numbers, 58% or so.
180,000 shipments are domestic.
Oh no, more than that. I think you're going to, with 50% more than half of 400 is over 200.
Oh, I'm sorry, 300. No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah. So it's a huge number.
240,000-ish shipments are domestic.
Yeah.
So, and if I look at organizations like let's use Unigroup, probably United and Mayflower, so they're probably not handling that many. I'd be willing to bet they're not handling that many shipments today. So if we took away all of and this gets to a question I'm going to ask in a bit, but if we took away all the consumer and all the corporate client, shipments and everything, and allocated 100% of their capacity, they wouldn't have enough to service it.
No. Yeah. I'm not saying that they are not going to, but we survive off of, in our industry, you know this better than anyone, being at university and a domestic hauler. Your drivers are looking for those coast to coast shipments. They're looking for that long haul. They're looking for the big line haul payoffs. And so, yes, you're going to utilize some of the other players not flying your color properly, probably, but are you going to give them the gravy? Are you going to keep that gravy in-house?
And more to the point, year-round. Our drivers need year-round shipments.
Bingo. And when we get to the DoD right now, I mean, again, these are staggering numbers. In the non-peak season, they average about 5,000 shipments a week. That's program-wide, international and domestic, in a week. But when we get to the peak season, those numbers approach 12,000 shipments in a week. So you're right. They're going to need as much capacity as they can in that summer. But then when we get to November, December, January, February, March, who's getting that work? Mm-hmm. And how many people are going to be able to survive those winters? Right now, if I'm an agent and I'm not doing work with company X, there's plenty of company ABCs out there that I can go to try to garner some work. Right after we get to this contract, there's only one. And so do those mom and pops have the wherewithal to build and form relationships with giant entities that you need to also understand? Some of these are publicly owned companies. Some of these are owned by private equity firms. Who's the money going to go to? You've got shareholders that you have to answer to. You've got a private equity entity that is looking to build equity. That's where the money's going to go. And so the number of people have talked about the potential for this trickle down and that more money would find its way to the agents and the drivers. Well, maybe you want to drive quality, maybe. But when you have shareholders of publicly traded companies and you've got private equity firms that have invested tens, hundreds of millions of dollars, they want a return, and that's
and I think so. I was a fan of the trickle down idea as well initially, but I will say, as I hear you talk, I'm seeing, and once the toothpaste is out of the tube, and you've awarded the sole source contractor, and now they're the only game in town. And even though they're paying for capacity, and as you buy more of a finite resource and product, as demand increases and supply stays static, your price should go up. However, there's nobody to keep them honest. So they can't lose the contract. We saw the POV contract go sideways, and they still didn't pull it because it's too late. So there is no alternative. So they don't pay top dollar and they get crappy quality. But then there's no way to say, hey, okay, you're turned off, you're in non-use, we're going to go over here. Because today there's 900 TSPs, and I could get put in non-use status if I don't perform for a performance period, and then company B gets my shipments now. Well, there is no company B, right?
That's right.
And so quality there, I mean, how do you ensure quality? What are the sticks that says, your quality better be X or else? I mean, there is no or else.
Well, and again, I think there's a huge learning curve. So I think the transition period. But let me tell you, I get calls from people at my office. Of course, not the people that are listening in right now, because those are the ones that are in the know. But I still have people today call me and say, hey, I heard there might be a change in the DoD program. What's that all about?
Right.
Do you think that those people who aren't even aware that this change is a coming, that they're going to be the ones that are reaching out to this contractor and raise their hands and say, I'm here, use me? I mean, they're going to be the ones that by the time they realize what's happening and by the time they reach out, all of those relationships will be formed. And I'm afraid they are some of the people that are falling by the wayside as the transition occurs.
Well, we got another question here from Tony Bonsamino. Can you elaborate on the other bidders that got pushed out? It sounds like only big boys jumped in, but I don't think that's true.
No, that's correct. There are some. So unfortunately, and look, I'm in favor because most of my members are small businesses. That there were a couple of teams that got together and built up or smaller organizations came together to form a consortium, a bidding group to try to bid on the contract. And I think that there were some viable entities there that could have been a real positive and help to ensure that many of those businesses that I was talking about might remain viable because they were of like kind. But unfortunately, those guys were said to be out of the running. And I think primarily because they realized that the pricing is going to have to be attractive enough so that there could be a flow down of money to the actual service providers walking in the door and to the drivers. And because of pricing, they were pushed aside.
Speaking of pricing and the contract terms, I heard something very interesting, that there was a leaked document that outlined what the target contract price was going to be for this. So the current military spend on this program is $2.3 billion annual, okay, which we talked about earlier in the show. But apparently, and you can tell me more because I don't have the details, but I'm sure you do. There was some sort of a memo that came out.
So the first time we became aware of that, there was a website on FedBizOps, Federal Business Opportunities. That was the website that they were using to disseminate information, that a inappropriate public release of information is what they termed it, had come out. And that the government, U.S. Transportation Command, was making this public to everyone because it appears that some internal documentation had been shared from the government to one of the potential bidders. So their remedy was to put it out and let everybody know. So I have two thoughts on this. That happened, okay, but what that did was, with the release of this information, it set the groundwork for what the government thought the pricing would be. And it makes it very difficult for a bidder to say, well, I got to bid more than that because the government thinks the cost is at this released information level. And so that made it very difficult. I'll tell you, our organization did a protest to the Government Accountability Office based around that topic. And we had some other issues that we raised. It went through a couple of months of information sharing and dialogue, and eventually GAO discounted our protest. They did allow for some of the things that we said, and so the government opened back up, made some changes to the contract, opened up the bidding again for a couple of weeks to allow anybody that wanted to adjust their bids to do so. But let me tell you, you talk about inappropriate government release of information. Holy cow, this was setting the table, unfortunately, for what the bids should be. And it really wasn't truly, I don't believe, open and honest bidding that went on.
Well, if a memo comes out from the office you're bidding to, and it says, we believe the contract's going to end up being $2 billion, everybody that comes in knowing the current spend at 2.3, and saying, well, gosh, well, our bid better be under $2 billion then, which means they're going to artificially deflate their bid to make sure that it's competitive. And now you've got all these people underbidding and basically shaving off an arbitrary $300 million of spend, which has to come from somewhere. And now you're going to win this contract at some artificially low number. They're going to award it for an 8-year period with no plan B. And now what? I mean, that is so irresponsible. It's almost like if there was like such a thing as a mistrial, you know, in the procurement world. To me, I mean, that's like a total showstopper to me.
Well, that is exactly why we protested and cost our association quite a bit of money to get the legal folks involved and put forth this protest. These are some of the exact arguments that we made, but GAO determined that Yes, these were internal documents, but they were preliminary numbers and not final numbers, and that the remedy that Transcom had come up with by making this information available to everyone versus a single entity. I mean, we made arguments under what context? I mean, did somebody just didn't automatically just call up and say, hey, here's some information. No, somebody talked to somebody asked somebody knew somebody.
So now instead of one bidder knowing it's supposed to be under 2 billion, everybody knows it's supposed to be under 2 billion. It's like,
that's right. That's right.
It's just crazy to me. Let's see here. We got a bunch of questions here. Let's pick a couple here. All right.
If I could, real quickly, while you're getting to those questions, for the folks that are involved with us here today, and you say, well, I'm in the mobility space, I'm in some other arena that's not DoD. Why do I need to worry about this? Well, let me tell you, there are some big entities involved with this who are already players in both the DoD and other arenas. And when you place this large a contract in their hands, they will be the determiner of rates. They're going to be the determiner of capacity. They're going to have so much leverage in the marketplace. It's going to affect every aspect of mobility. And then let me tell you, don't let this company or companies get established in the marketplace, get established in the DoD, and get that running smoothly. Because then they're going to look around and say, what else is there? And they'll start out, I think, in the government arena. So if you are involved in GSA, you're involved with Department of State, then it makes, I think, sense from a government perspective. But when we've got 80 to 90% of our traffic moving in one program, why wouldn't we just wrap it up in all of there and make this, cost savings come into play for all of our organizations? And then when they get that, the bigger you get, the more you want. They're going to start looking around, particularly if they are involved with other corporate clients, and start leveraging that business. So be careful, look over your shoulder, even if you're not in the DoD, be aware, because this big monster's coming after everybody once it happens.
Yeah, so it's the biggest domino that's going to fall. And when it falls, to your point, now they set the price of moving, they set the market rate, right?
That's right.
And then whoever wins it, and since it sounds like at this point, the major consortiums all have the van line alliances, which is good and bad. I mean, at least we know there's assets at the table. It's scary because now they all have, let's say, corporate client bases, right?
That's right.
So our corporate mobility people who are tuned in right now, they have corporate client bases. And so now if all of a sudden they maybe handle 100,000 shipments in a year, this van line might, maybe, and now 400,000 is coming in hot. And now all of a sudden they don't have capacity anymore.
That's right.
For corporate shipments. Okay.
And you're under a contract, just like you would be under a contract with a corporate entity. But when that contract calls for hundreds of times more moves for you to manage, now you're not going to haul them all, but you're going to manage. I worry about those agents that are of van lines that are not focused on the DoD, that are doing national account, that are doing COD. And when all those trucks are already filled with DoD work that is mandated by the contract that they handle, I just wonder, are they going to get those trucks filled for you?
Well, now I will say this, there's a lot of independents that operate, that service DoD shipments. There's a lot of independent mom and pops that are unaffiliated out there hauling DoD freight. They've made a living in Fayetteville, North Carolina, or Fort Hood, or wherever, just being an independent. Didn't need to be van line affiliated.
That's right.
Now, what I'm hearing from those folks is they're seeing the writing on the wall, and they want to now get into the corporate relocation space and start to diversify themselves because they got significant investment. Now if a van line that might be 80, 90% corporate and COD, all of a sudden now is 100% military or two, now there's going to be way less capacity in the corporate space, at least for the near term, for the first year or two. And I could actually see this causing rates to go way up for corporate mobility customers, right? Because now
Everybody
all
has
of a
to
sudden,
fight to get that space. That's right.
now all of a sudden, two of their major van lines that used to haul 50% of their tonnage just aren't even in that business anymore.
Yeah,
You know,
it really is a landscape that we really have no idea how it will mature, how it will develop, and what the effect is going to be on all of the players across the mobility spectrum. And so that's why I say, even if today you're not involved in it, you better keep your eye on it, because it's going to come a knocking on your door.
I've got a question here from Facebook from Miss Megan Meredith Harless.
Ah, Miss Harless.
I believe she is a military spouse.
Yes, I know Miss Harless well. Yeah,
Do
in
you?
fact, I just saw something on LinkedIn about Miss Harless, an award that she won recently. So
Yeah. So is she involved in some of the, is she involved in this some way?
She is involved in so many levels, and really has been, I think, a catalyst for change in a very positive way. So I applaud Megan, and has really been, I think, a voice of reason. Surprisingly, I didn't think this was going to be the case when this all started, but has been the voice of reason because she's got entree into a number of congressional offices. She's been made aware of information through exchanges with Transcom. She's been involved with numerous folks involved in the industry as well. So she's got a very well-rounded perspective right now. So I'm interested to see what her question is.
So Ms. Harless writes, if the GHC, Global Household Goods contract, for some reason doesn't get awarded, which some people have speculated due to protests or blocks or whatever, what would IAM propose as a solution to the military PCS process?
Well, one of the things that's come out in the last National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, is a call for an advisory committee. And this advisory committee would be made up of multiple stakeholders. And one of the things that we have asked for is that we have stakeholders on that are decision makers. We don't want the GS-12, 13s on that. We want the major generals, the lieutenant generals, the admirals involved in that advisory committee. We want spouses, military spouses and military members involved in that. And we want industry involved with that. And we want some real intentional discussion on some of the changes that need to be made. And there are going to be, unfortunately, in that as well, in the industry, some winners and losers coming out of that. And there's going to have to be potentially some pretty significant changes in the current structure of the program. And so I think we are definitely open to some of that. We've got some ideas that I think could move forward and make for some positive change. But there are going to be some casualties on the industry side as a result of some of this. You're going to have to provide quality service. You're going to have to be able to provide streamlined claims processes that don't take forever to make a military member whole when goods are lost or damaged. So yeah, we've got to get to the table and have some real discussions with the key decision makers and be willing to compromise and make change. I don't think the idea of just keeping basically everything in place but throwing it over to one entity to manage is going to do anything to improve the process.
I'm going to answer this question, even though she didn't direct it at me, and it's probably imprudent that I do so. I think that if you wanted to, I think you could. I think making a change to the program could be a good thing, and here's how it could be. I think if you went in and you actually made asset-based moving companies who could prove they had assets and an intent to service the business, all TSPs. And you went from having 900 domestic TSPs to 3,000 TSPs. You lowered the amount of regulations, red tape, bureaucracy, and stuff in the tender of service so that it's actually easier to do the business and less onerous. You simplified the systems that we use to be closer to what every single other customer requires of us. And you instituted a CFAC rule, Common Financial Administrative Control, in the domestic arena that you have in the international arena. I believe then you would actually get to what Transcom wants and what military spouses want and military members want.
I think you raise a number of points that have got to be discussed in this advisory group setting. The problem with the advisory group mandate coming out of the NDAA right now is that advisory group is going to be put in place right about the time that the contract is let. So what are we advising? You're not advising this contractor. He's got a contract that tells him what to do. That advisory council is too little too late. That needs to be something that's in place now. Take the contract off the table and let's see if we can make some significant changes that remedies many of the problems that Ms. Harless is well aware of.
Well, I would ask Ms. Harless, and I don't know if she can comment, but I would ask Ms. Harless if she'd be willing to champion that type of a strategic working group to figure this out. So before we...
She already has. I will tell you, one of the reasons that's in the NDAA this year, I mean, a major authorization bill for what all of the Department of Defense is able to do for the upcoming fiscal year is because of her and what some of the ideas that she brought forward. Again, the problem is that advisory group makes so much sense in the current environment. It makes no sense in the GHC environment. We are not going to have any ability to advise the contractor when the contractor has a 500-page document.
Oh, it's too late at that point because this is a strategic group, and at that point we're just arguing over tactics, and it's too late, right? And so I agree with you, and so and now I will say, I mean, I think there was a long time where the industry was just fighting this, and maybe Transcom didn't look at them as willing partners to sit down and discuss major changes, and so they said, well, screw it, we're just going to do it without you, and here we are. So, I don't know. I mean, I think you bring up some great points and obviously demonstrate a willingness to talk about this. And if Ms. Harless has the sway that you say she might, maybe there's still an opportunity to go back and actually put a working group together that can discuss these issues. Anyway.
Well, the working group's going to be put together. It's a congressional mandate. The question is the timing and will it already be a contract and change be irrelevant at that point?
Yeah. We have another question here on Facebook from Mark Gray. To Chuck's point about the mom and pops coming to the party late, this is a time when AMSA and all of the state moving and storage associations need to be proactive and provide educational seminars and leadership to inform and instruct their mom and pop members on how to get their piece of the pie. We're losing enough small moving and storage companies as it is.
Mark, unbelievable point. Yeah. We need to provide some form of education, some form of illumination as to what stands before organizations. I will tell you, I can't speak for AMSA, but I can speak for IAM, and that is exactly what we are trying to do, putting out information through our website, through newsletters, through podcast to try to, but we've got the international audience. One of our goals and one of our growth areas is domestically, and we're going to be targeting that as we move forward because we feel they're underserved, particularly at the mom and pop level, and we want them to understand that we are an organization made up primarily of small businesses around the world, and that we do understand your plight.
Well, and I think this is a perfect opportunity to get that across because this is free and they can see you and they can listen to us and they can participate. And I think they can start to get a sense of the value that they get when they come to the association. Let's see here, a couple other comments here. I'm just going to kind of go through really quickly here. Contract will keep, Dave O'Connor says, contract will keep the long haul in-house and farm out the last mile. So the local agent will get work, but it won't be convenient or lucrative work. That should be a great concern to local agents and mom and pops. So he's worried about the hauler, the viability of haulers, traditional.
I'd point to one other thing. Right now, it's not a done deal, but there is another proposed contract out there, and that is for non-temporary storage, which is permanent storage, basically. Mm-hmm. And those are typically handled at the local levels. Those are warehouses and warehousemen that may do origin and destination work, but also do this long-term storage. There's another contract under consideration that would, once again, take all of those literally about 1,200 non-temp storage providers around the US, and they would consolidate that into either a single contract or up to as many as 4 regional contracts. So you would have one contractor controlling either the entire country or major regions of the country, and it's going to be significant change. The other thing that under the global household good contract, what had been previously done by those local non-temp storage contractors was the packing, the loading, the drayage into storage, maybe much of the delivery out of storage. All of that except the storage piece is part of the global household good contract. So those folks that are doing permanent storage right now to the tune of 50, 60,000 shipments a year.
Yep.
Once again, the control of that goes away under the global household good contract and the potential for this new non-temp storage. Transcom is trying to, what I call privatize, but they're trying to consolidate every aspect of the current program under the fewest number of entities they possibly can. And that is a death. That's a dagger in the heart to small business.
You know, but that whole premise, though, consolidated under as few entities as possible. I mean, the truth of the matter is you can't move 400,000 members with a few entities. It's just a misnomer. It's a flawed premise. I mean, you're never going to get to a few entities, so you might as well call it what it is and contract with all the entities you want to do business with directly, so you have the accountability that the members are looking for. And then you have the cost that the military DoD budget is looking for. So, I mean, that's my thought. Hey, we got a question from Facebook from Doug Owen. Is there any talk of going to a self-procured move approach?
No, there's not in particular, but military members have the ability now. Used to call them DIDY moves, do-it-yourself moves. Now they call them personally procured moves.
PPMs. Yep, yeah, I know it.
And so, you know, almost every shipment has a small aspect of that. If you put your golf clubs and a few other boxes in your trunk, your mom's best crystal, and you put it in your trunk and move it, you can get compensated for that. A military member can. And some get to the point where they just feel they want to go out, either do it themselves or procure a move from a commercial mover themselves. So that ability is there. It's just not on the larger scale, not really utilized to the level that some would want.
So I'm a little bit of I used to specialize in PPM moves in my prior life, right? And the rule is that the government will give you 95% of what they would have paid to move you with, if you can substantiate it with your receipts and weight tickets, right? That you actually moved the weight, right? Based on your rank and your dependents. Now, if the new contractor comes in and shaves $300 million off the program and the rates go down by 11%, 12%, the viability of PPMs decreases by 11%, because now your budget as a military member doing a personally procured move goes down by 11%. So now you have fewer people being able to actually make any money doing DIDY moves, meaning more volume potentially into the program. But on the other hand, if the quality goes down, because as we're pontificating here, if the quality goes down and we have more service failures, you got more people wanting to do DIDY moves, but the economics just aren't there. And so I think there's all sorts of implications throughout the market.
I agree. I'm not sure if Doug is trying to relate the DoD program to some of the lump sum environments that are starting to build in the corporate arena.
Yep.
And we just haven't seen that as much, maybe, but the viability and the capability is there. As you said, it's whether it's cost effective. The other thing is they pretty much throw themselves out onto the commercial playing field when they go that route without any oversight, help, direction from the Department of Defense. So you decide to go in that direction, you're fed to the wolves, I think. So I think a lot of military families think twice about doing that.
Megan came back and said, thank you for your answers. I'd be happy to follow up with both of you after this.
Sounds great.
It could be a productive conversation.
Megan knows that, and I might have my director of government and military affairs, Dan Bradley, reach out to her as well. So
cool.
So Megan, we always want to partner with you, Megan.
Love to meet you, Megan. Let's see here. Let's get that. I got one here from Dick Scaffa. Pretty interesting comment, actually. I think another angle we haven't really talked about. When the government is paying me, I reasonably expect to get paid. What if the winning bidder has financial problems? Do I require getting paid in advance by credit card? Who can float that kind of cash? $2 billion.
Well, Dick, thank you very, very, very much for that. Because here's the thing. There's a vehicle by which the current transportation service providers get paid. They utilize a system through US Bank called Syncada. And if you do the process appropriately, you can bill and have the money in your bank account 3 to 5 days, sometimes even less. What that US Bank and their system is going to be in place for the contractor. But right now, there's no rules, no guidelines as to how subcontractors will be paid. They're going to be paid through the contractor, and there are no rules about how long it's going to take to get you paid. You would think that an entity would want to pay their subs as quickly as possible to maintain their level of solvency, their level of quality, maintaining the capacity. But there are many that are afraid, and we see this some in the corporate arena, that it may take 30, 60, 90 days or more to get paid. And that is a death nail. Cash flow is king in our industry, particularly at the agent level, and they just can't continue to pay payroll by packing material, put gas in those, or fuel in those trucks if they're not getting paid in a timely fashion. That's right.
That's right. Our drivers are getting paid on a weekly basis, sometimes 3 days, sometimes 72 hours. A lot of them are running on advances, especially this time of year. We're obviously doing payroll for our office staff every 2 weeks. If we get strung out on a major piece of business, 60 days, 90 sometimes, some of these, that'll kill you. I mean, you got guys going into bankruptcy that are doing huge revenue, and it's not because they're not profitable, it's because of cash flow.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's exactly what Dick is getting at. And so once again, we've got to ensure that the money flows appropriately under the contract, but I've seen nothing that indicates that there are requirements that force whoever the contract award winner is to pay in what, in quotes, is timely fashion.
Now, Georgia brings up an excellent point as well about the transition of this, right? You also have to be concerned with entities that do not win. It is important to watch all your receivables. So if you have a huge receivable with military move management companies that don't win this thing and they go away tomorrow, what happens?
Great point. So another thing that IAM has done, we put together an open letter to General Lyons, pointing to the issues that we believe are in the contract, but even more of a foot stomp on the issues that we feel are going to arise in the transition. Once you see who the contractor is in April, that then really sets the tone for the future. And many of the transportation service providers, I worry, are going to be starting to look for an exit strategy. Mm-hmm. And I'm afraid that the exit strategy may, for some unscrupulous types, may be, let's get the work, let's get paid, and maybe disappear, or at the least slow pay my underlying service providers. We have all, and this is scary because capacity is going to just dry up. When people aren't getting paid, they're not doing work for these people who've got that are getting the shipments. Mm-hmm. And what we've already started to see, I've seen numerous agency agreements between transportation service providers and their underlying service providers, their agents, saying, I must be paid in advance of doing any shipment for you based on the estimated weight of the shipment. That is becoming more and more common, and we haven't even gotten started with the peak season and haven't even heard who the award winner is.
I'm sorry, did you just say people are asking for prepayment based on the estimate?
Exactly. And this is, I thought it was going to be a while before this started, but as we are in the bidding process, the rate filing process for 2020, starting in this peak season, many people have contacted me with concerns that I've got these agency agreements and they're calling for prepayment, and there's no way that I could have hundreds and hundreds of shipments out there moving and having to pay before I ever see a dime. Just don't have that wherewithal.
Wow. So at this point, if people are watching this, right, Chuck, and we're going to wrap soon, so this is my last question, and I think it's really the question of the day. If people are watching this and they're like, oh my God, this can't happen, what do they do?
Well, what we have been asking people to do, and we have provided template letters, we've provided contact information. We believe that the only way to stop this is through congressional engagement. We've gotten some proponents on both the House Armed Services and the Senate Armed Services committees. If you have a congressional office, a senatorial office that has people that are on those committees, but even anyone in Congress, let them know about your concerns. They need to hear. We have called on about 125 congressional offices, most of them key DOD figures, and they are really the only ones who can stop this. There's also one other aspect that we are waiting to hear back on. We, through our congressional efforts, forced a GAO, Government Accountability Office study, to determine the viability of this contract and the concept of a single provider for, and we're waiting on the results of that. That may, depending on what it says, may have some effect on how quickly and if this contract can move forward. But if it's not through congressional outreach, if it's not for knocking on doors, making phone calls, writing letters, then I think we're at a point where this might be a fait accompli.
Yeah, I mean, that's what some of the insiders are saying is, hey, this is going to get awarded. I mean, the date's already out. They're moving forward. They don't really care to hear from anybody that's not on board. They've narrowed it down to 4,
Only one who can stop them is Congress. Congress has, number one, the ability, the authorization side of it, but they have the purse strings. They can very easily say, we're not giving you a dime to move people till you come up with a better solution.
Great points, Chuck. I mean, you've really opened my eyes. I've learned a lot. I think our folks out there have as well. We were up to 124 viewers. I think we're at 119 have stuck with us for an hour and 24 minutes.
Wow.
So there's obviously a lot of interest. Yeah, no, really. I'm bored out of my mind right now. I don't know what they're doing. No, This has been great, Chuck. Honestly, I think this is extremely rich. I think a lot of people haven't realized the implications and the far-fetched implications of what's about to happen here. And you've been a tremendous asset here. Any final words? Anything else you want to share with the people?
Yeah, well, I got to do a commercial. Come on.
Oh, please do. Please do.
You know, if you're not part of the International Association of Movers, regardless of where you're located and what strata of the industry, I'd encourage you to take a look at us. We are a proponent of small business. We are we don't just delve into the DoD arena. We have an annual conference that has almost 2,000 attendees. And it is a networking conference where business is done and people walk away with business. So if you're looking to diversify, great place to do that. So, and pretty relatively inexpensive to join our organization. I'd encourage you, but we've got a great website. We post information that's publicly available. If you need to educate yourself on this topic, go to our website, iamovers.org, and you can reach me at charles.white@iamovers.org as well. I'd be glad, regardless if you're a member or not, to answer any questions you may have and help you. And then I'll encourage you to join my organization.
You know, I know that when I was, you know, starting in this business, you know, you and Terry Head, your predecessor, were both extremely, you know, I'm trying to give this little plug here. Extremely welcoming and knowledgeable, even when a lot of people didn't like me very much.
Never.
You know what? And I got friends too, like Sonny Singh, who was just a little mover in Northern Virginia, who reached out to you guys, and you helped him and let him know. And he got into the program. My previous company ended up buying his, and life was good. So. I think that there's a ton of value in your association, and thank you so much for helping everybody out there, Chuck. So appreciate you, Chuck. Man.
Appreciate you having me, and let's do it again.
Yeah, it'd be fun. I think we probably need to have a conversation next time there's some news, so that we can let the people know immediately.
Sounds good. Look forward to it, man.
Take care. Bye.
All right, thanks, man. Peace.
Peace.